Welcome to Talkin Trades. I am Rut Walker with Union Up, and with me, as always, is Randy Beall, who is the business manager for GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com, also known as the Atlanta North Georgia Building Trades Council. And Randy, I'm kind of bittersweet. We've done a bunch of these, and as I understand it, you are moving on.
It's time to retire. So yes, we're gonna move on. And April 30th will be my last official day here. And it's been a pleasure, to work for the building trades, and we'll get into that. But and turn the reins over to Kenny Mullins. Excited about that. I said at the meeting recently that on April 30th I'll turn the lights off, knowing in my heart on May 1st they'll turn back on, burn a little brighter with somebody else at the helm. And I don't mean that I don't think I've done a good job. I'm saying that I think he's going to do a great job, and I'm looking forward to that. You turn it over to people. When you build something up, it's nothing better to turn it over to somebody it's going to take it even further.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've created the brand of GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com. It's easy to remember. It's people know exactly what you're about, putting people to work in
pretty
this
easy
environment.
It's a lot better than angbtc.org.
Yeah.
I think is what when I started here in 16, that was our website, angbtc. Who knew what that was, right? Atlanta and North Georgia Building Trades Construction Council. Wow, I almost couldn't get it out. But, along the way, we hired this little company that was doing a lot of great work. I'm going to say little, it's not little, but Union Up, right?
Yeah.
That helped build that name. And Rut, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed working with you. I hope we'll stay in touch. And I wanted to just kind of like talk to me. We try and recruit young people into the trades. A lot of the, times people will talk about, well, you can go into the trades or you can go to college and, go into the business world. And I'm like, no. I talk to the parents all the time.
Right.
No, there are two different training areas. One is just as valuable as the other, if not more valuable in the trades, because we're talking about building stuff. And then you can work your way up on different facets of a career. And you are the prime example of that. I want to just kind of get a sense of what your track was. I don't think I've ever asked you this, but, you were 18-year-old Randy Beall at some point, in high school doing your thing, and you got out. Take me through like what your track has been. How did you get where you are now?
Yeah, so, I would say that for those that know me well would say it was probably very simple because my dad was a sheet metal worker, union sheet metal worker. My two brothers were union sheet metal workers. And since then, I had an uncle that was a sheet metal worker. All those were already in the trade, but it wasn't that easy for me. First of all, I came out of high school, I had 3 scholarships to play college baseball. So initially I thought about, doing that. And then as I began to, I love dreams. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's got a dream. My dream now would probably be to play golf all the time. But I knew as 5'6", I probably wasn't going to be a Major League Baseball catcher. I kind of felt like that would not be the case. I might have had enough talent to play somewhere in the minor leagues, maybe if I'd have continued to progress. But I did not want to go to college. And I would have only went to play ball. Right. That's it. And so my first thought of a job was to go you're going to laugh at this because everybody knows me, would say, you've probably been good at it. I want to be a car salesman. And so
I might have been really good at that.
I might have been good at that, right? Yeah. And so anyway, I remember.
Too late, brother.
Too late, yeah. It's never too late.
Yeah.
My dad came into my room one day as we was nearing graduation, and I already made the decision not to go to college. And he said, look, I want to talk to you about cars, and he said, you can make a good living at that, but let's talk about when the economic times are not so good.
Yeah.
What happens? I didn't like the way that sounds, and so I said, I'm going to go get in sheet metal. So that's how I got in sheet metal is this, and I remember my interview with the committee, because we all go before a committee, right? So I go into this room, there's 6 management people, there's 6 for labor. And the coordinator of the school at the time, Ron Cosby, said, well, we know why you're here, but why don't you tell us why you're here? And he was referring to our family, And I said, well, I went down the list, and they said, okay, that's what we thought too. But anyway, they accepted me and went in and went to work, like anybody else.
Doing what?
Sheet metal. Yeah, sheet metal. So my first referral was to McKinney's. Let me say this. My first and only referral was to McKinney's.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say that I never worked for nobody but one contractor. And my first day on the job was with a guy named Mike Kelly, who was a service department foreman doing sheet metal work. And I was told when I went to work with him that most people only stayed with Mike about 6 months. That was it. So, 3 years later, I was asked by the local union to come and be an organizer in a program that they had just started up called Youth to Youth. And I was a third-year apprentice, but they was using youth to contact youth. It was a great idea. And so I stayed with Mike for 3 years until they, I want to say this. He tolerated me. It's not I tolerated him. But, look, I did the right things. I come to work on time, and I worked hard. And so I think that's how I made it past the 6 months, right? But went to the union and worked for 6 months. That was my first taste of any kind of organizing, which was interesting. And
so your legacy here is certainly partly building a brand that people can get their minds wrapped around and understand what we're trying to do with the Atlanta, North Georgia building trades. And you represent lots of different building trade unions. We've got the big guys that everybody sees a lot, the plumbers and pipe fitters and electricians and sheet metal workers but you've got a lot of different operating engineers and that kind of stuff. But you've got a lot of people on the council where there's a ton of different opportunity that maybe hopefully we've brought some attention to, because you can learn about every one of them on georgiaconstructioncareers.com. But how do you work with that many people in getting the message out?
Well, it's difficult, I will say. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my career in a minute, but when you're a rep for a local and you're repping for members, there's a different dynamic than doing this job. So I would say it's easier in some respects, harder in some respects.
For people who don't know what a rep is and what they do.
A business representative represents the membership of a said union, negotiating contracts, enforcing the contract, working through issues, problems, etc. And so, we're at Sheet Metal. I might have had, we organized a group in Fort Benning, about 1,200, 1,400 people, and I repped for those, right? But, we had 2,000 members. Well, you come over here, I don't have 2,000 members, right? I have 19 business managers. So it's a different dynamic, right? And by the way, you're talking about really, really exceptional leaders when you're talking about business managers. So you've got 19 exceptional leaders who run a local union, and they do it their way. So when you work for them, I will say this, I've had the best board ever. I've seen my board flip, by the way. Everybody on my board is flipped out. I'm talking about went out of the business manager job onto something else, whatever, with the exception of two people, Robert Duffield with Iron Workers and Pedro Franco with the Laborers. Everybody else on my board is turned over since I've been here.
And you're talking about guys who have gained the trust of a majority of their members such that they became elected. These guys get elected every 3 years.
That's exactly right. And so, you build a rapport as a business manager here with those board members, right? And then, you lose some along the way. Some retire, some went to international, some got beat in elections. And so, but anyway, I will say this, throughout all of that, there's never been one thing that I've ever asked for they haven't voted for. If I asked for it, they gave it. Now, that's good, but it also means it's all on me, because if something didn't work, and we had a lot of things that didn't work.
So for people who don't know, you are the business manager for the Atlanta, North Georgia Building Trades is elected by the council that you represent.
All 19 affiliates.
All 19 affiliates.
That's right.
And they elect you as their leader to be, a political voice, a marketing voice, a community voice, et cetera.
Recruiting, anything we need to be, right? And so, anyway, it's good to sit here and say that they never turned me down on anything. So what that did is allowed me to be creative. I could go try things, right? We tried, this council did no marketing, zero marketing. And we started, and I think I started with billboards, right? And then we tried some radio, and then we did some other things. And then we found you through the IBW. And that was a game changer, really, because somebody sit in my office one time and they said, I want to say it was from radio. And they said, well, tell me what's working. And I said, if I knew what's working, you wouldn't be sitting here. We were just throwing darts, right? Trying to figure it out, But anyway, we found our niche now. I believe, and I think Kenny shares this opinion too, with Union Rut doing our social media and all of that, and recruiting and marketing from that perspective. And then our organizing 24/7 has been huge. Those are fantastic things. And then when you couple that with us being on TV with Friday Night Football, girls flag football, baseball now, basketball, you put those two things together and it's a win. And that's really, if I've left anything for anybody to work with, I think it's those things.
Well, I want to pivot here for a second, because one of the things that I am really in awe of in your career is, this is awesome because we do this on a daily basis, GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com, and we put out ads and we do all the things that you and I do together. But one of the things that I want to pivot and talk about is your really invention, construction, so to speak, of the YouthBuild program. I really want to talk about that. Every time that we shoot video or anything around that, I am always humbled and grateful to work on it, because you're talking about kids so YouthBuild, for people who don't know, is a program to teach at-risk youth 16 to 24 about the skilled trades and the opportunities, because a lot of them don't know. They don't know that they can come and go through a pre-apprenticeship program, learn about all the trades, learn about the values that you have to be successful in this trade, learn that you can, if you turn out of that YouthBuild program, you can get direct entry into any of the apprenticeship programs. You can go through there, rise through the ranks, become a journeyman in whatever that trade is, and go out and have a super awesome career. And I really want you to talk about YouthBuild, how it came. I don't want you to, I know you're not a guy to toot your own horn, but I really love that program, and I want more people to know about it, because if you've left a legacy, that's a really good one to leave.
Yeah, and so I tell people that know what I do. The building trades has paid my job, paid for me, right? In other words, they provided for my family. But where my heart is really the academy, and because that is where we've changed lives.
The academy
is Georgia Building Trades Academy, which is where YouthBuild is housed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's a separate entity. It was given to us, or it's given to the business manager by way of elected of this job. So when I took over in 2016, the academy was already there. It was dormant and had been dormant for about 8 or 9 years. And the only thing the academy had ever done really was train members back in the day on OSHA 10. Now, this is before apprenticeships started doing OSHA 10 themselves. And of no fault of the business manager of that time, that's what they did. And then when that stopped, there was kind of nowhere to go or no vision to go anywhere else, right? And that's okay. There's plenty to do in this job without, finding. But when I came on, I in 2016, it was October of 2016 when I came on. I found out I'm the president of the academy. Well, what does that mean? And I found out, well, they're not doing anything. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what can we do? So I remember praying about it. And, what can I do with this organization to make a difference? And in November of 2017, over the Thanksgiving holidays, I took about a week and a half, and I wrote it. I stole curricula off the web from every union out there, and I built about a 450-page curricula about all 19 trades. So what basically was a PowerPoint, right? But it was about 450 pages. Put all this information together, and when I got back, started in 2018 of going to community groups and talking about the trades. Just talking trades, right?
Yeah.
And Urban League, Goodwill, churches, and then WorkSource Atlanta, which was right over here. So developed a relationship over there with a lady named Christina Smith, and she ran a YouthBuild program for the city of Atlanta. And so that was probably in late 18, then 19. And then around the summer of 19, I got a phone call from her, and she said, look, Atlanta is not going to go after the YouthBuild grant again. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, it sounds great. What do I do? She said the words, I said this many times, she said the words everybody likes to hear. You ain't got to do anything, I'll do it all.
Right.
And so really, I get to be the face, but the credit goes to Christina Smith. She wrote the grant, and it was $1.5 million. And we had to service 84 in that first grant cycle. That's where the money goes to, right? We won that grant because she wrote it. I didn't write anything, right? My name's on it. I signed it, but she did it all. And then we have subsequently gotten 1.1 million and then another 1.5 million. In addition to that, raised a lot of money along the way. But the story really don't end there. That's the beginning. And we take in X amount of people every time. I think COVID 2020, right? Was hard, man. It's hard. We didn't meet our numbers. In fact, we did a review with the government, and they come in and audit us. Make sure we're doing what we say we're doing. But there was nobody reaching numbers back then.
Right.
It was hard to get your number. And I say your number, we had to service 84.
Right.
Okay. And we're tied to certain zip codes, certain ages, not necessarily an ethnic group,
right?
But just got to hit those zip codes and ages. Now, mostly minority because of the zip codes we're in, right? And there got to be barriers. We can only take 10% that have a high school diploma. Once we hit, so if we got 84 students, 8. Yeah. We can't take everybody else has to earn a GED while they're in our program.
Yeah, and that is the amazing part about it. You're taking kids from at-risk situations, and you're not only teaching them about trades, but you're getting their GED, their MC3 certifications, OSHA certifications.
OSHA 10 and 30 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're teaching them not only getting them certifications so that they can go to work in the construction trades, but also how to show up on time, how to look people in the eye, shake their hand, all those things that they may not have gotten had it not been for the YouthBuild program.
And we do all that. We do a great job of that. The staff that we have does a great job of preparing people, right, and getting them ready. But I'm proud of everything. All of that is awesome. I'm very proud of that legacy, like you said, right? But the two things that we'll touch on now that really I want to hang my hat on, if you will, that I think can be taken so much further to another level is 4 Wheels for Work.
Yes.
And Insure the Ride.
You taught me something, because I'm thinking, okay, we're recruiting, we're helping expose young people to the trades as an option of somebody who might not want to go to college or can't afford to go to college or whatever, that you can have a great career and you can learn a skill and it doesn't cost you a student loan and all that kind of stuff. But one thing you taught me was, MARTA's not going to the construction site. If you don't have transportation, you're dead in the water. You have to be able to get to, it's the only job that you're working your way out of, right? You build the hospital's done, you go and work on another hospital or a data center or a stadium or whatever it is you're building. And that's in a different area. You got to have dependable transportation to go to work.
Your own dependable.
Yes, your own dependable transportation.
100%. And that's often overlooked. And so it was overlooked by me. And so how this all came about was Christina, as we got the program rolling, we're in probably late 2020. We're starting to really
get YouthBuild program.
YouthBuild, yeah. Starting to get through our first set of students. We take in 20 or so, And she said, we got a problem. And I'm like, okay, what is it? She said, a lot of these kids don't have driver's license.
Right.
Well, my response is like, this was it. I said, well, tell them to go get it. I got mine. Right. And I think that would be most people that look like me, have the background like me, middle class, raised up out in the suburbs, that would be the answer.
Right.
Well, tell them to go get it. I got mine, right? And she said, I'll never forget it. She said, you need to sit down. So I sat down in the chair and she said, their mamas and daddy, first of all, in a lot of cases, their mom and daddy ain't even around.
Right.
Okay. They may be incarcerated, could be dead, right?
Right.
But either way, they don't have a car. go back another generation. Their grandmother and grandfather never had a car because they've always been dependent. They've lived in the city. They've been dependent upon public transportation. So immediately, light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, well, they can't get a driver's license. And she's like, that's right. They don't have a car to drive to go take the test.
Yeah.
So immediately we go into fix-it mode, right? And my first thing was, okay, well, we'll take grant funds and we'll make them, we'll get them training, either their driver's license, right? And I said, there has to be a company out there in Georgia that's regulated by the state, certified by the state, that they can take a course from and then get a piece of paper and get their license, right? And there was. And so then the next thing was how we fund it. Okay. And so I think it should be easy, right? We got a grant that is helping this age group, this population, these circumstances. So let's use some of the funds to get a driver's license. Nope, can't do it. It's illegal. Now
It's
imagine
illegal.
that. It's illegal within the grant. It's not in the funding of the grant to help people get their driver's license. It's a huge oversight. I have been to many YouthBuild meetings nationally where I talk about this, and I talk about it with congressmen, of y'all need to change this because you're missing the boat. You're missing the boat. You can train people all you want, but I have 2 pieces of paper in my wallet that are very liberating. One of them is a union dues receipt. It says I'm a journey person. Number 2 is my driver's license.
Yeah.
Because with that, if I got a vehicle, I can go anywhere, right?
Right.
So anyway, so this goes back to the board we were talking about earlier. So we got a problem. So I go to the board and I say, look, we can train people. We're doing it, but we can't put them to work.
I mean, think of all the things that an employer would require that need identification.
Absolutely. And so I went to the board, and the question, I gave them the problem, and they asked the question, what do you need? And I said, I need $1,500 a month to make sure every student that comes through our program gets a driver's license. They said, done. So the building trades, our working brothers and sisters who pay dues to make this organization run, their managers voted to make sure everybody gets a driver's license.
Yeah.
And look, that bridged us. Now, here's the good part. So, through some diligence of mine and Christina, we have built up a pretty good group of people who sponsor our program, and they give us money, right? And these are private institutions. And now we don't need that $1,500 from the building trades. As a matter of fact, I think we only took about 8 months.
Yeah.
And then we found monies, right? And so we still got that going. We just have it privately funded now.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you get a driver's license. Well, if you ain't got a driver's license, what else don't you have? You don't have a car.
Right.
So,
Which means you can't get to work.
You can't get to work, right?
Yeah. Unless somebody takes you, and nobody's going to take you if you're working,
But
if
you
you're
know
living in
what?
Ackworth and you're,
Right. And you failed the
working in-
question, though, right? So a lot of the unions, when you go in, when you talk to the coordinator, they're going to ask you, do you have your own dependable transportation? And I guess mama is dependable,
Right.
but things happen, right?
Yeah, and you can't teach a kid to be responsible for themselves if mama's driving them all the time.
Exactly. So anyway, I'm we got this, we've got the driver's license fixed, and now I'm going to a different issue, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, let's figure this out. And one night in bed, I'll never forget, I was about 2:30 in the morning. I'm sure you sleep the way I sleep, and that is I wake up in the middle of the night with a business idea, right? And
Wrote one down last night.
Yeah. And I say God gave me the name. I woke up and the word "Four Wheels for Work" was just in my head, right? So I go right to my iPad, go to GoDaddy, and the number 4 in both places. It was available. I bought it, and it was a few nights later that Insure the Ride came in my head because I figured, well, if they got a car, they don't have no money.
Yeah.
By the way, I'll tell you the craziest thing is how much insurance is for kids in the city of Atlanta. I'll give you, for instance, the very first car we gave away, this is what brought up Insure the Ride, is we gave it to Ibrahim Yamini.
Yeah.
And by the way, Ibrahim is graduating his apprenticeship
Right on.
4 years later, sheet metal. And I get to speak at that graduation this year. And
awesome.
but it's really cool. But anyway, never got there without the car. But anyway, it was a used car, right? Had 100,000 miles on it, right? Still had life left, but
Right.
we're not talking about brand new.
Right.
Want to establish that. I think it was like 6 years old, 100,000 miles. His insurance was $1,700 a quarter.
That's crazy.
A quarter. Now you do the math on that. If you're an apprentice, right, and you got $1,700 a quarter, a couple of $100 a week, whatever, roughly $150 a week, off your check immediately is going to insurance. That's not gas. That's not a car note. That's
Right.
right. Okay. So anyway, we pay 1/4 of the insurance for them and gets the ball rolling, right? They
Lets
don't
them
have
get
a
a
car
little
note.
money in their coffers. Lets them go to work
Absolutely.
for several weeks, etc.
Yeah. So those two things, as I look back, those are game changers.
Yeah.
And here's why I know that they can go a long way. So I've been to a lot of meetings. We talk about 4 Wheels for Work. We talk about insurance. We're the only people doing this. We were the only people doing this. Now, a friend of mine in New Mexico heard about it. He heard me speak about it, right?
Right.
He went back, and I gave him an idea. He was like, well, where do you think I could get cars? How do you get them? And I said, well, I talked to a car dealer. Then we raised some money, yada, yada, in different ways, right? Contractors now. And I told him, I said, where are you at in New Mexico? He said, well, we're pretty close to the border, yada, yada, yada. I said, well, why don't you talk to the government? Border control. They got vehicles. They auction them off.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your local police.
Probably
right?
trucks and something that
exactly.
be apropos for a construction site.
So a year later, I see him in the next meeting, and he's 6 cars in already. 6 cars donated by some was Border Patrol, some was local police. And he said, man, it was so easy. He said, I went and told them what we're trying to do, who we're trying to help. And the county commission, voted to give us 3 cars or whatever it was. And now that's been duplicated in 3 other locations.